The following is a presentation of the Six Arrows Radio Network.
On this episode, I discuss with Kevin Reeve N7RXE, bicycle race communications, and the LOTOJA Bike Race. This is the Ham Radio 360 Field Radio Podcast. This show is brought to you by Chameleon Antenna, versatile, dependable, stealth, and built to last. Thank you for clicking and tuning in. I'm your host, John Jacobs, W7DBO, Whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar. If this is your first time listening, thank you for giving us a try. This show is dedicated to all things amateur radio outside of the shack. This show is part of the Ham Radio 360 network, and if you listen to Kale's show that just released Tuesday, he announced that he's taking a much-needed vacation. We wish him well and enjoy the vacation, and we're looking forward to hearing him get back on the podcast air. We also have the Workbench podcast with George and Jeremy that release on the opposite Tuesdays of this show. So as a networking note, as I mentioned, Kale is going to take the next couple months off. He's been with us for 3 years, and I have thoroughly enjoyed all of his podcasts, and there is quite the repertoire of information out there that is cataloged that you can always go back and listen to. Before I started doing podcasting, I mentioned to Kel once that I don't know if I could afford to listen to any more of his episodes, because every time he had a guest on, talked about a new area of ham radio, and I would get excited and purchase something to tinker with or go into a different facet of the hobby with those episodes. So I kind of joke that now that he's taken a little bit of vacation, I guess my pocketbook can regenerate itself. 2 weekends ago, my wife and I, Lynn Marie, had the opportunity to volunteer as neutral support operators in the LOTOJA Bike Race that goes from Logan, Utah, to up through Idaho and then over to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So my interview with Kevin surrounds going about how they organize for this event, and this is a great interview for those that are not only into event communications and supporting bike races or that type of event, but also this has a very strong emergency communication preparedness component to this. The ability for this event to practice your gear, to work multiple repeaters, mobile repeaters, APRS, iGates. This has a little bit of everything combined into making this event work. So with that, I hope you enjoy this interview with Kevin. Okay, we have Kevin Reeve, N7RXE, on the Field Radio Podcast. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us. And both of us, we just experienced, is it LOTOJA or LOTOJA?
You know, some people call it LOTOJA and others call it LOTOJA. I always say LOTOJA, and apparently both are correct.
So this is my second year I was able to volunteer for this event, and you're one of the people that are instrumental in this. So why don't you explain for our listeners, what is LOTOJA and how are the amateur radio community involved?
LOTOJA is a bicycle race that goes from Logan, Utah to Jackson, Wyoming. That's 206 miles, single day. So it's the longest single day sanctioned bike race in North America. So it's sanctioned by the United States Cycling Federation. About 1,800 cyclists. It's been going for 35 years. Ham radio has been involved for 26 of those years, and I have participated for all 26.
Once you volunteer, you can't get unassigned.
It gets in your blood. Some of us there are many that have been doing it for a bunch of years, and it gets in your blood. It's exciting. If you're an Aries guy, a Races guy, a CERT guy, you love LOTOJA because it is the real deal and it's full of action.
Yeah, and that's one thing that it really impressed me, and the reason why I came back and did this for a second year and hope to do it again is the amateur radio, you are very integrated with this event. You are not a sideline observers.
No, we are not. In fact, our club participates in about 9 different public service events, bike rides and marathons and the like. And one of our rules is if we're not helping with the organization, meaning we're part of the committee that organizes it, and we have interaction with the race directors, so we know our part and they know what we can do, we won't participate. And that has served us well, and it allows us to be a vital part of the event.
So this spans across 3 states, and how many many counties and public safety entities do you interface with?
So, there are a lot, and we're very fortunate. The current race director, Brent Chambers, when he took over, there's been about 3 or 4 different organizations that have had LOTOJA. One of the best things he does is the public relations with all the law enforcement. So you've got community law enforcement, you've got county law enforcement, you have highway patrol, you have departments of transportations from 3 states, all of those permits. And he does an incredible job. And along the route, our rovers will stop and talk to the highway patrol. We'll see them pulled over. We stop. We communicate with them, and at our communication and command centers, like in Star Valley where I was, we called dispatch when we arrived, and we said, hey, we're the command center for LOTOJA here, communications, here's our phone number, and during the event, we're talking to each other. And in fact, in Afton this year, where one of our command centers was for communications, one of the highway patrol officers did call us. Dispatch passed our number on to him. He did call us and relayed some important information that we needed to know. So we try to work as close as we can with everybody along the route, even our communications group.
So how many amateur radio operators are there, and what kind of positions are you're doing with this? So
we've evolved this over the years. First year, there were 120 cyclists 26 years ago, and we had about 14 that participated this year. And for the last few years, we've had around 135 amateur radio operators. Now, not all of those 135 are amateur radio operators. Some of them are their spouses and or friends, as we for our mobile vehicles, which are about 35 of them that go along with the racers with first aid and mechanic kits and neutral support, we require at least 2 people in the vehicle. That's for safety. If you've done this event, you know you need 2 people. You need eyes and ears. So 135 we actually had amateur radio operators from 6 states this year, primarily from Utah. We have a good group out of Montpelier, Idaho, and the Bears Club that helps us. And then in Star Valley, Wyoming, and then in Jackson, Wyoming. So Wyoming, Idaho, Utah. But we have a ham radio operator that flies in from the East Coast to participate. And we also had somebody that came up from California this year to participate with LOTOJA.
So I was one of the I guess SAG vehicles or neutral support vehicles. In this race, I've done other bike events, but I think one thing that's unique to LOTOJA, or how I'm going to say LOTOJA, there we go, is you mentioned neutral support and how you are basically the support for the racers and riders in certain parts of the course.
That is correct. So there's about 1,800 cyclists, and if you look at this highway, which is mostly Highway 89, imagine 1,800 vehicles following 1,800 cyclists to provide support for them. Can't happen. So the cyclists on support are only allowed to go to feed zones, and only to certain feed zones. Some of them are neutral feed just because it can't handle the traffic in those canyons. So they're only allowed to go to feed zones. So we are the only thing they have for 206 miles of the event to support them. For the racers, those who have a USCF license for racing, we will carry wheels. It's a neutral wheel set. So cyclists check in wheels, which are rims and tires, already inflated. They're well marked, and we carry them, and we follow packs. There's about 16 racer packs that start about 6 minutes apart. And then there's the ride side of it. The ride are anybody can enroll to ride LOTOJA. You're not going for time or placement or standing to move yourself up in the cycling world. You're just going for personal goals or with friends or doing a relay. And so we provide the support for that group as well.
So how many, I believe I was trying to count up, I switched over, I believe, 6 different repeaters during this event. So how many net controls in total did you have operating?
So believe it or not, the first few years we did this, we used a total of 2 repeaters, but the route changed. for the last, I don't know how many years, 15 years, maybe a little bit more, it changed. And that required that we go through mountain passes where there was no coverage, there was no repeater coverage. So we've worked with the hams in these areas to put up either a repeater or help them put up a repeater or help them maintain a repeater, or also we bring 2 portable repeaters. So I counted. There were 9 repeaters used during this year's LOTOJA, including 2 of them that were portable repeaters. And so what we do is we've divided LOTOJA into 4 command centers. And so communication command centers, we have one in the Cache Valley area that covers from start up to the summit of what is known as Immigration Canyon, northeast of Preston. Then we drop into the Bear Lake Valley in Montpelier, and we have a command center there that's taking care of communications there. And in all of these communication zones, there's usually 2 repeaters. And then if there's other repeaters in the area, we have them set aside as backup. We drop into, and so from at the top of Mount Pillier Canyon, Geneva Canyon, we put a portable repeater on a mountain site, and that covers that canyon really well. And it covers us. And then up on Salt River, there's a repeater already in place that covers the south end of Star Valley. And then we put a portable repeater up on Black Mountain just east of Alpine, Wyoming, or west of Alpine, Wyoming. So it's quite a logistics day technology-wise. And that doesn't even count the Digipeaters that we use, because we use APRS heavily for LOTOJA.
Yeah, so we haven't really talked about that yet, but that's one thing that impressed me too, is that I think this is one of the most effective forms of APRS technology deployed with amateur radio, is you have all these units running APRS, and that's just a great way. As when I was doing the event, I would check in and out of the nets as I would move through, or I would check in with the feed zones. But I always knew that my position, I didn't have to really try and report where I was in the race, because APRS was working that for us.
Yeah, and we worked really hard to put APRS. Every vehicle mobile has to have APRS. That's another one of our things. And so we've even got some APRS units that we loan out to those who don't have them. But the majority of people already have them. And it's worked well. The first years of the race, we actually had a magnetic board with the race route, and we would move people along it, but we didn't have 35 cars. And Net Control was constantly asking for position reports to find out where people were. And that was an inefficient use of radio time. As LOTOJA grew and there was more important traffic, we needed to clear the radio waves for that. And so we worked really hard, and we continue. Every year we figure out where's our problem and where do we need to improve on. And APRS is one we've targeted for the last few years to really improve on. And we still got one little hole in Snake River Canyon that we need to work on. But other than that, we pretty much have full coverage of this event with APRS. And so by eliminating where are you traffic, LOTOJA is like no other. I mean, if you're involved in public safety events, you're passing a lot of small traffic. In LOTOJA, it's got to be priority traffic. It's like you need something to help a cyclist. You need an ambulance. You need a medical person that's with us. Some of our support crews are doctors or nurses or first responders or EMTs. And so you've got somebody that's injured and you can't, with your skills, can't take care of him. You need somebody else. So we've done that, and APRS has cleared a lot of unnecessary traffic for us, so that only that traffic that's critical can take place.
Now, I noticed one thing with APRS was I saw a link that somebody has built a custom map display that actually filters out all other APRS traffic but the event and puts it up on a website.
Yeah, and we use that at Net Control, and then there's another version of that for those who are out in the field can use it if they've got internet access, so like on their phones. And that's been really good. The thing I love about it is it lists off to the right-hand side all of the units it is seeing and how many minutes since it last saw them. And so, as you can imagine, on a map with 40 units with APRS beeping, they get all clustered together on a map, and you have to zoom to try to find them. Well, what's cool about this map, you just go to the column on the right, find them in your list, click on them, and then they're highlighted for you on the map, and you know exactly where they are.
Yeah, and it clears out the common things that are digipeating or peating in the area, repeaters, weather stations, other things like that.
Yeah, and the other important thing that we've learned about APRS. So this route is quite rural. It goes through many rural communities, and many of the hams that participate, even though they've done it year after year, don't know exactly where they are. They know they're between Smoot and Afton, right? But because they don't drive it every day, they don't know exactly how far out they are. But with APRS, they can beacon, or we can go to the map. Let's say they've got somebody, they're in a canyon and somebody needs an ambulance and they don't have cell phone coverage to call for themselves. By their beacon, we can see where they are on the map. And if we have any doubt, we can look and see how long it's been since they last beacon, or ask them to hit the beacon on their radio if they're using a radio for their APRS. And then when we call 911 to roll an ambulance or roll law enforcement, we know exactly where they are. That map that we've custom built, also you can click and put mile markers on it. We've actually we contacted the Department of Transportations for each of those states and got the KML file for mile markers along the route. So we can download that. And then we can click on it and it overlays those so we can see exactly where they are. Law enforcement, they work off mile markers. And so that's been a huge asset.
Yeah, this is my second year doing it, and I knew I was on the race course, and that's about it. And there was a point where we were actually trying to figure out whether we were in Idaho or Wyoming. So we knew we knew what feed belt zone we had passed. But this is not a typical road that people travel. It's quite the back. It's the back way to get to up to Jackson, where I've been many times. So definitely that APRS is, very instrumental, and it is, as a SAG person, it was really effective for us. So you have portable. You say you have portable digipeaters and iGates. What's the setup on those?
So let's talk iGates. In the past, we've done everything from like a KPC3 TNC or a D710 or D700 connected to a computer, like a laptop, at one of our command centers, running APRS IS32 and feeding that in. This last 2 years, we wanted to build appliances. We decided we wanted just to be able to go someplace and plug in, and it would automatically connect to the internet if we already knew the SSID and passcode to get in and connect. And so we took the Raspberry Pis, and we used the Pi TNC that's quite popular, and we built what we call appliances. And the original goal was to have them like rack mountable, but what we ended up is they're in some these plastic cases that you can get at sporting goods stores. They're kind of like ammo cans, but we're able to put a 35 amp hour battery in, a radio, whether it's a handheld because we're receive only, or in the one that we have that we use this year, it's just a Yaesu 2-meter mobile rig, receive only, and then the Raspberry Pi, and then it's powered, and we just take an antenna, in this case a Diamond X50, put it on a tripod on some fiberglass mast, and we can deploy it anywhere there's internet nearby wirelessly. And it worked really well this year. And we did our initial tests last year. We actually deployed 2 of them in Star Valley last year. One was at a ham radio operator's home on the north end of the valley, up between Etna and Alpine. And that one worked well. And that was all because of analysis that some of our hams did after LOTOJA said, you know what, we don't need more digipeaters. We need iGates. iGates are our problem. And we agreed to that. So we built a couple of portable iGates to deploy in Star Valley. We were lucky this year, a ham that just moved there to Star Valley and retired, set up an iGate in the north part of the valley. So we only set up one this year. And that's the way we like it. We like it when others have the infrastructure in place and we don't have to worry about deploying it. So that was the iGates. For digipeaters, we put them in these hard, Pelican cases, and they're usually taken to mountaintops. There were, how many did we do? We deployed 4 digipeaters this year, and they're usually a KPC3 modem, or TNC, and then a radio, either a Motorola, CDM 1250 or 750 VHF radio, that we've deployed, and we love the KPC3s for Digipeaters because it's easy to make them Digipeaters. And then just some batteries, 12-volt batteries to run them in a good antenna. And what's kind of funny is in one of the sites in immigration, we have a Diamond X50 that we hang up between two trees. So we shoot with our spud gun, air compressed gun, lines across two trees, and we lift it in the air between the two trees, and the coax dingles down. At most of our other locations, we're able to use some mass. At one site, the masts are just the fiberglass 4-foot military poles that we've gotten are just tied to a fence, and then an antenna put up on top of that. And that has worked very, very well. Again, worked on this for many years to perfect it, to make it deploy and run so you're not just spending a lot of time tweaking. And we test them all on the air the weeks before LOTOJA just to make sure they're working.
So we were digipeating I had the digipeater turned on my Kenwood. So is it, are you relying on other vehicles digipeating to get to these, or have you mapped out the entire race course that a driver could go on APRS all the way through the course and be able to hit all these?
We've done both. One of the challenges with turning the Digipeaters on in the vehicles, like on the D710s, is we're primarily using VHF frequencies, which is where APRS are. So if you're constantly digipeating, it cuts out your receive audio, right? And so if you're constantly digipeating with 35, 45 vehicles, or let's say even 5 or 6 around you, if they're digipeating every 3 to 5 minutes, it can cause some problems for you missing traffic. And stuff. So we've tried to not rely on that. Although this year we turned a couple of the D710 radios that we loaned out to people to Digipeat just as an experiment again. But for the most part, we try not to rely on that, on Digipeating from the vehicles because of the amount of traffic.
So were these Digipeaters co-located? You said you had two portable repeaters. Did you co-locate these together with your portable repeaters?
Yes, we do. In some places, because we had 4 Digipeaters that were deployed and only 2 repeaters. Some of them weren't. For example, Black Mountain, we had the opportunity to put a repeater in the site, but there's so much RF noise in there, it just couldn't hear, and it caused problems. We tried a couple of times. So the local emergency manager there that we work with in Lincoln County got permission from the Forest Service for us to just deploy it outside. So what we did is we go several football field lengths farther to the north away from the building and deploy the repeater. There's a Digipeater in the building, and that seems to work well. It's just the repeater with a receive. And what's interesting, that is a VHF repeater, but it's only in a small gate or rack mount rugged case, and it's only 8 rack units high, so it's not very high. What we've chosen to do is a wide split. So if we can go with a larger or more frequency separation between transmit and receive, our cans or our duplexers don't need to be as big. And so this was something we thought about for a couple of years. We kind of went through the theory on it. We talked to some experts. We talked to the company that sells these cans and looked at their signal rejection, and then decided to try it and bought a set of these duplexers. In the past, we'd have to take, if you've seen you got 4 or 6 cans of duplexers that are usually a couple of feet tall, maybe even taller.
Fills up a room.
Yeah, they're just a pain to transport, and you're supposed to transport them vertically, and we have to lay them down for the back of a truck and stuff, and so it made it really difficult, and it would untune them. So this has worked well on that site, and we've had a nice wide split repeater that doesn't take up very much space. We use usually a controller and a couple of Motorola CDM 4-channel 750s, and we have a Link UHF radio, so we can link them together. Those repeaters were 60 or 70 miles apart. They could have easily linked to each other. One was on Geneva Summit, just east of Montpelier, the other one on Black Mountain. We could have linked them together, but there's no reason to, but we can if we need to.
What's your power consumption? Well, first of all, is it was it 25 watt output, or what was your output on those repeaters?
I think that actually one of the actually I need to take that back. Both repeaters have the Vertex repeater in them. One's a VHF, one's a UHF, and then the link radios are UHF Motorola CDM 750s. So I believe those are set for. I think they can do 50 watts. Maybe they're 25 watts, but we're targeting around 25 watts, and they've served us very, very well. And they serve us. I was just doing an estimation, and we have about 80 miles of the race route of the 206 mile race that has no cell phone coverage. And that is lower than it has been. The cell phone companies have done some improvements. So in some areas of the fringe, we've got cell phone coverage. But that's a long ways without cell phone communications when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. So what's your power consumption on the repeaters? So the event runs 12. Well, you probably turn them on the night before, obviously. So what kind of battery do you have?
So they're usually deployed Friday, anywhere from the morning to the early afternoon, depending on when we get up there. We have 2 crews that leave at 6 a.m. to go deploy everything on a Friday before the race. So they're on the air. In both cases, we put a small solar panel on them. One of them has and we have 2 12-volt Group 27, deep cycle marine batteries. And so we measured on one of the repeaters. I took a voltmeter. One was at 12.3 volts when we were done. The other one was at 12.6. I couldn't tell you where they started, obviously higher. But we put a Goal Zero 30-watt foldable solar panel on one of them. The other one had the 15-watt Harbor Freight, foldable solar panel on them. And we've done that to keep them topped off. Just so that, when they're not being used, they continue to maintain that charge. So they get the majority of their traffic, obviously on Saturday. And the first one, isn't used as much, the one in Geneva, for a shorter distance than the other one. And when you figure, when the first cyclist crossed the finish line this year, the back of the race was more than 100 miles behind him.
Yeah, that's quite a big span of support area. I know we were trying to keep up with our race officials and moving back and forth, and even the pack that you left with gets very much spread out, depending on if they stop at feed zones longer or if they're just a slower pace rider. So what about let's talk a net control. You have four different nets or 4 different EOCs, I guess. How do you stay in? How do you stay in contact with each other and coordinate?
We found a need for net controls to be able to talk to net controls across mountain ranges with no repeaters across those mountain ranges. In some cases we do. So we set a goal years ago that we were going to set up command centers with internet access. So we actually use a tool like Skype where all the net control stations are connected together on a back channel, and so we're monitoring that. So if we need to pass traffic. The other cool thing about that is we have at least 4 people at 3 of the net control stations. Then at Jackson, it's usually 2, and this year we actually had 3 because you usually got 2 repeaters going, and you need people that are doing things. We log all the incidences in our own online incident command database that was built like a ham radio logging software, custom built for this event to allow the radio operator to be able to log quickly accidents, incidences, dropouts, anything else, so that we've got that, and then we can close out those tickets. So, and what's cool about having that back channel is, let's say Montpelier or the CashNet are really, really busy. Jackson can be online early in the morning because they're already up there, and they can help them with some of the traffic or some of the logistics. For example, if we need to hunt down a support crew for a particular cyclist because they're dropping out and net control's real busy handling other traffic and stuff, maybe it's an emergency or an accident, Jackson, that incident is put into the incident database. Jackson could pick that up and make the phone call and then put the results back into the database that, hey, I contacted their support crew, they're on their way, and then once Cash learns that support crew's arrived, they can update that ticket and do that. So having that that back channel of communications and that incident database is really critical for the event. In some years more critical than others, but it's a way that we can talk to each other. And where I am probably more knowledgeable than anybody, there's a couple of us that have done this so long that really understand it. In Afton, I could send advice down to the other net controls when I heard the radio traffic over that back channel when they were trying to solve a certain problem that I knew how to solve that or who to get a hold of.
Yeah, so that's the key thing is the expanse of this event is so far, and there's other events that are, that I've seen that just don't have, the ultra runs or something like that. Everything finds itself in a very compact space, but trying to deal with logistically with this long of space across multiple jurisdictions, it really does. We kind of talked about this before. This is the perfect example of we're public safety or we're MCOM or we're ARES or RACES. How much experience are you getting out of this that you apply now to your local ARES or MCOM groups? So, as a kind of a side joke, we say LOTOJA is the closest thing to the real emergency that it's not, that isn't, right? And it's just a rolling event. And this year there were 5 ambulances called. Logistical problems. Net control has to deal with prioritizing traffic at some points, clearing the frequency, communicating precisely what you need and be able to pass traffic so that it is understood on both ends, and repeating information and being in areas where communication isn't that good. It is the real deal. I've sat in the EOC in my county most of the time as an ARES guy. Most of the time it's been activated for flooding or fires or some other events that it's been activated for. LOTOJA has 100 times more traffic than I ever saw in that EOC. It is just unreal what it is. And that's why we split it up into those 4 command centers to deal with it. And it's the best training you can have. Now, from those of us who help organize ARES in our area, let me tell you some things that have been takeaways for us. We know who's cool in a crisis. We know who can deal with situations on the spot and help solve problems, and we know who cannot. We know who can put it in a 12 to 14-hour shift, because LOTOJA, you have to be there before 6 a.m., and some of you don't get to Jackson until 8 p.m. We know who can handle that kind of a shift and stay level-headed and not blow their cool. And we also know which ones cannot. But what's amazing to me, and that's why it attracts, you would think 135 ham radio operators. How do you get that many people? Well, we turned people away, literally. It's because of that event that you're dealing with real stuff. It attracts those who are interested in emergency communications, who are interested in ARES and RACES, who are interested in CERT with the communication side of it. This is where you get the real practice. And we also know that it'll test your gear to the fullest. For example, my Gold Zero foldable solar panel sits in my garage, as does some of my deployable antennas and rig runner, and only goes out 3 times a year. And we know that LOTOJA will find your busted antenna, your broken microphone, and problems with your radio. It does. Somebody, we guarantee, will have problems with their equipment during LOTOJA, and that's why it's such a good event for those who are into that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's what attracted to me this event was I'm 3 hours away. I'm down in central Utah, and this is up in northern Utah. For those, we're kind of trying to give some geographic reference to this. This is up on the Utah-Idaho border up by Bear Lake, and it goes up to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So, yeah, I'm 3 hours away, and that's at an early morning. If we come, the first year we came from Lehigh, we're up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning heading up there, but that's the reason why I want to participate in this race, is because we are not on the sideline standing there next to an officer on the corner, and if anything goes wrong, you just tap on his shoulder and say, here, handle this. The race directors have put us in a pretty critical role of, doing medical support. I had about 10 events myself of either replacing tires, filling air. At one point we were on Strawberry Peak. Before Strawberry Peak, I guess that's the steepest climb of the race, is that one. We were standing there helping a person with air, and we turned into a temporary watering hole. People just kept on riding by asking us if we had water, so we started holding water bottles up in the air. So you are very much integrated into the event, and you're right, that's what attracts me to the event. I'm sure that's what attracts other people, is you get a chance to put your gear to the test in a real, I guess Gordo would say, real event drill. And it's just not a Aries practice activation, go to a parking lot and pass fake traffic.
Exactly. And that's what it's attracted me to it. And many of the people, I ask people, why do you come back every year? I have hams tell me that they said, I live for this event every year. And from young hams to hams that are above retirement age, I had a ham that's just recently retired, and he says, LOTOJA, he's done it for many years. In fact, I think he did it the very first year I did it. I don't know if he's done it every year, but he told me he uses LOTOJA to keep his mind sharp. And he's built his own spreadsheet to help track where he is and stuff along the race route, and loves statistics and numbers. So we're very fortunate to have. Now, what's also interesting, is we don't take brand new hams in LOTOJA, although we do. We tell them that they've got to get their feet wet with a couple of other smaller events before they can do LOTOJA. Or if they're coming from outside Cache Valley, which we have a good number that do, that they need to be participating with their Aries group, or if they're not part of Aries, with their CERT group, or helping out with public service events in their area, besides just checking into nets, so that they've have some communication skills when they participate, especially as we move along. Now, some of the clubs in Wyoming, this is the only event they ever participate in, so we recognize that their amateur radio operators are quite new to event communications and this type of work that we do, but we allow them to participate because it helps their clubs and their organization's goals to better their communication skills for their own communities.
So you're with the Bridgerland Amateur Radio Club, or BARC, and you have your Aries. So is there any type of, because I'm an outsider that just happened to volunteer, is there some type of certification levels you have with the group? And if they reach these certification levels, they're offered more responsible positions in events like this?
So we have not. There's some unwritten ones. However, this year, because we turned away 9 people, and those 9 people weren't happy that they couldn't participate. Okay. And it's hard to turn people away. I mean, what ham radio public service event are you turning people away? I know of none. In fact, I'm on a listserv for all the ones that happen in the Wasatch Front and northern Utah, and they're always begging for radio operators. So we're talking about of some, not certification, but for some priorities. For example, in LOTOJA, for those who follow the racers, we call them yellow because that's the bib numbers. That's their call sign. Like yellow 5 is following the 5th group of racers. We need people who can have quick reflexes to deal with racers who want to be on the road immediately. They don't want, they're not there for a pit stop. They're there to get back on the road. Can haul wheels, wheels and stuff. Another priority is those who have medical training, who can take care of road rash, the most common thing, or can check for broken collarbones or have advanced medical skills. So we look, we don't expect everybody to have it, but I need 8 or 9 of those. And so those get a priority. Those hams get a priority. Those who participate in like the Bear 100, and I think, John, you've done the Bear 100 a couple of times, which is the ultra marathon, 100 miles. And sometimes you're overnight and you need 4-wheel drive and you've got to do wind link, right? You've got to have some advanced skills and you've got your own APRS and wind link set up. Those will get priority. However, we always want to make sure that younger hams, meaning those who are new to the hobby, have opportunities to participate in LOTOJA, and we don't want to ever try to turn people away fully, and I try to work them in the next year and give somebody else a break, so that because there are times when the people that come back year after year can't participate because family events happen. So we're trying to, I guess in a nutshell, a fine line about, getting skilled radio operators for this event because it requires that, and not, turning people away and not having them participate down the road when we might need them.
Yeah, that's the thing is I see on either email groups or Facebook or something like that. It's just, it's the hardest thing to find volunteers to fill slots. And I've been in some ultra runs where they couldn't even find me a backup. If I didn't make it up that hill, then there was no comms of that aid station. It was, that sparse. And so that's what I like to see. I mean, obviously the BARC group is a very healthy group you have up there that's very well organized and working this. And one thing I really liked when we talk about this being a real event drill or planning for MCOM or ARES is you actually complete the FEMA communication plan, and I saw that in the packet. So you're actually integrating some of the FEMA emergency drills type things just into your regular communications.
Yeah, like that log, the team log, right? If you're going to go out as an ARES member and participate in a real emergency with your local government and group as an MCOM group, they're going to expect you to fill out those forms. So we've incorporated those, and we asked the team to practice filling them out. There's no right or wrong way, but practice filling them out. So when you go on site somewhere, you know what to do. And that was, first early on, we didn't do that. And somebody brought that up and says, we should do that. And if you noticed our frequency, even though we have that beautiful frequency map that kind of has circles as to where you should use the radio, we also filled out the frequency resource allocation sheet that you use in a real FEMA, in a real emergency. So we fill that out to get people used to seeing that. If they ever get integrated into one of those drills. So that's an important part. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed on that is you have LOTOJA simplex frequency. Have you ever gone to that simplex frequency for this event?
Yes, we do. Sometimes we worry that there's too many. We have had to do that more often than not. We've relied on that car to car. So to explain to the listeners, we'll have the net frequencies, right? And that's for net control. But then we also have a car to car frequency, and everyone must monitor that's in a vehicle. They have to have the capability to monitor the net frequency. And that's usually their bigger radio, their bigger antenna, and then a car to car, and that can be a handheld with a mag mount. And I think some people just still have a handheld, but that's so you can talk to the car in front of you and the car behind you. And if you're ever in those places where you can't get communications out, you talk on the car to car. And then we have a feed zone simplex that in addition to the net, the feed zone is supposed to listen to, and that whole exercise of having the vehicles check in with the feed zones as they pass through was an exercise for those feed zone communicators to be able to log traffic. And then that way, when a cyclist support crew comes up and says, I haven't seen the fifth pack of yellows come through, they can look at their sheet and see if that car's come through and then give them some advice about where they might. Nope, I haven't had them through. Oh, yeah, that car came through. So, if they're with the lead, they should have already come through with that. But that feed zone simplex we have had to use when a repeater went down, and net control gets on that and works that.
Okay, so my setup last year was more complicated, like I said, because we ran digipeating. We wanted to run digipeating the whole time, and this time we kind of just kept it as a standby. So this year I had my D710, which had APRS on one side and net control on the other, and every time I did beacon, it would give a little beep and it would cut out, and that wasn't too bad. And then when we had if there's a lot of traffic, we turn off the digipeating. And then I had my BTEC 2501 that's permanently installed in our vehicle. And that's another dual bender. So I had car to car on one frequency and the feed zone on the other. In the past, when I did digipeat, I had a third radio, and that would be Kenwood would have the APRS only. And then I would have a second radio that would have LOTOJA simplex and then whatever net control. So like you said, the complexity of being a support vehicle, and then you have to be able to have all these, possibly up to 3 radios, 4 or 5 frequencies, and be going through a race course and try not to hit any of the bikers, I think was the primary goal of any operator.
We've been very fortunate. In the 26 years I participated, there have been lots of accidents with cyclists. There have been 2 deaths as the result of LOTOJA. But I feel that we've been very blessed. There have been no car cyclist accidents involving our support crews. Now, with that said, we've had a couple of cyclists run into our support crew vehicles when they were pulled off the side of the road because they weren't paying attention. And that happens sometimes when you get on that flat road in Star Valley, heads down, you got a headwind, you're watching the white line on the edge of the road and you're not paying attention. We've had a couple of cars over 26 years, only twice happened that. We did have a car in Snake River Canyon, a drunk driver, clip a bicyclist and sent her to the hospital. And it was a hit and run. And luckily, people were right there and got the license plate of that car and it was found. But we're very fortunate that we haven't had any real accident involving cyclists and vehicles because the race is an open course. Cars still travel on these roads. They do close 2 canyons down to cars other than our own moving in the same direction of the race, but oncoming traffic is still there. And these aren't 4-lane roads. These are divided highways. And in some of these canyons, there is no shoulder.
Yeah, it is very tight. And if you've ever had white knuckle, I mean, for a while I was trying to become an airplane pilot and I was taking my flight lessons and my instructor was telling me not to white knuckle the yoke. You definitely white knuckle your steering wheel in this event. You are, especially coming down the canyons when the racers are picking up as much speed. We left our windows rolled down because we wanted to be able to hear, because a lot of times visually you can't see them coming around your side, and they're sometimes going faster than you are. So you want to hear them first, trying to leapfrog, because there's some restrictions in Wyoming having to leapfrog. And so you have to be pretty aggressive with your driving, and trying to work the radio and traffic log it's a great thing that you have a backup in the car, because there's just too much multitasking going on.
That's right. We need all eyes and ears on the road and the radio, and you need somebody to write down stuff, right? We may be looking for a certain cyclist. You got to write that down. I don't know about you, but I don't have a photographic memory, especially as I get older. John, I do have some advice for those who are organizing ham radio efforts for these communication events, if that would be appropriate.
Yes, please.
So, I've helped. This is the main one that I, myself and Tyler Griffiths, N7UWX, are co-chairs of this event. Tyler actually helps out organize some others, and I've been involved with some others, but this is the main one I focus on. I think as an e-com group or an Aries group or even a club, you can do too many events, and it becomes a commodity and of less value to even your own group. And then I find the more events you do, the harder it is to find radio operators to do events. So I think you need to be choosy about which events that your group's going to participate in, and you also need to do that to protect your own members who are donating their time, their own money. LOTOJA is not you're paying your gas, and your food up and back, and 206 miles. You're putting out a little bit of your own pocket, and to do that event after event, I don't think we do have people that participate in all 9 events that our club does, and my hat's off to them. I personally choose to do 3 or maybe 4 of those events during the year, just so that I have time to do my own thing. So I think that's an important thing. And then the other thing that we mentioned was put together yourself a committee of ham radio. Not one person can take on these events. You need 2 or 3 hams to help you in different areas. In LOTOJA, we have 12 on the committee. We have people that are dealing just with wheels and mechanic kits, one that's dealing with first aid kits, one who deals with the starting line, one who deals with the infrastructure, and he has several people that help him to make sure all the infrastructure equipment is ready. We have somebody that just takes care of the volunteer waiver release form and the lunches, just takes care of that paperwork. It's too much for one person to do. And then finally, make sure you're well integrated with the event itself, that you are invited to participate in the planning of it. the worst thing you can do is have a net control that shows up to run net control who knows nothing of the event. To be valuable as ham radio operators, we need to be more than just message handlers. We need to be able to help solve problems that we can. If all we do is pass messages to others who are then required to solve the problems, we slow down the problem resolution. And so the more involved we can become to be knowledgeable about the event, to be knowledgeable about the rules, to be knowledgeable about how logistics work, the more we can do on our own to solve those problems and communicate that allows those race directors, race officials, and logistics people to do the job that they need to do on event day.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's great advice, because from my first time experience, this is my second time, but my first time, we got the highly effective things you do with this and the Bear 100 that I really appreciate, that I don't see with other races, is you actually have what's called the LOTOJA Bible or the Bear 100 Bible, and it's an ongoing Google Doc that really it gets the volunteer, especially the first-time volunteer, very much up to speed on a lot of things about the event, very detailed information. And so that's one thing that I notice, because it's a Google Doc, it gets updated. And then the other thing is yes, that waiver form person will hunt you down at the start line, as I was this year. I had the forms with me because we just got late getting going. And so, but yes,
you were on the waiting list.
I was on the waiting list. So, but yes, for the first time, I don't know if I shared this before, but the first time when they say you're going to be leading a pack in a controlled 20-mile-an-hour speed out of Logan City, and you queue up in this parking lot, and all of a sudden you're next, and you're standing there, and there's operators, pointing you to get out in front of the start line, and then all of a sudden you hear someone saying, go, 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 and you look behind you, and there's a pack of riders right on your tail. That was very nervous as a first-time person. Like, am I going to make a wrong turn and take the pack out of the, but the organization level of this event is so, I think that's the strength of this event. And that's probably why you're so integrated with the LOTOJA team, is because you are highly organized in the beginning, and this is not an event that's just put together in a few weeks. What's your planning cycle like? When do you start planning? Obviously, is it right now for next year?
So the first thing we do when an event's done, and you probably saw this, we send out a little survey, right? Because I only saw the portion of LOTOJA where I was, which was Afton, right? And I didn't see what happened at the starting line. I wasn't there. I may have heard a little bit of the radio traffic. I didn't see what happened in Montpelier, Cache Valley. I didn't see what happened in Jackson. I may have heard stories. So it's important for us. It's like the elephant, right, in the room, right? We all have a different perspective. We have to get feedback from participants, and we incorporate those. So that's the first thing we do. We're planning. Then I start getting itching in about February. We start taking signups in February, and we have a form you fill out to sign up to participate with LOTOJA, as well as our other events, that asks you some questions about your radio gear. Do you have a tracker? What kind of vehicle will you drive? Can you haul wheels, et cetera? So that starts happening in February. And then usually over the winter, the infrastructure team will do its analysis of what happened with APRS and the repeaters. Did we have problems? And we start making plans. Like for the iGates, that's when we started working on the iGates. We worked on the iGates all winter long and did testing and did that. And then we meet with the race organizer. We start communicating with them in about May. And then at the end of June, they have a meeting with us. The race organizer and a couple of his team come up, meet with about 12 of us. And we probably have a 2-hour meeting, and he talks about what might change and what we should be prepared for. And we relay to him any concerns that we have or any ideas we have for improvement. And the nice thing about having those 12 people there are people who did net control. There are people who were on the road during the event and are over different areas, so they can give their perspective and ideas to make it better. And then I probably communicate starting in July. About several emails go back and forth to the race director, and then August, I try to have all the assignments done LOTOJA's the second, usually it's the weekend after Labor Day. So I try to have all the assignments done the end of July. We actually have to order T-shirts the last, and that's an important part, right? The volunteer packets. We have got to get those T-shirt sizes right. So we turn that in the end of July because the race organizer has to order 400 volunteer T-shirts plus ones for all the cyclists. So we get that in early, and we try to have all the assignments made right then as best we can. And we always have people we had a couple, 2 or 3 people that had to drop. So we were able to go to our waiting list, and that's how you got in this year, John, was you were on the waiting list, and I was able to move you in. And you were within 2 weeks of the event were rather willing to do it. I had actually reached out to somebody else and they had already committed, so they couldn't. So my next step was to go to you. So it's quite a planning process. I put in quite a few hours in the evening before, just getting all those last minute details in place and making sure everybody's name's spelled right. I screwed up twice this year.
And that's why I said this is a very well organized event, and I think that's another thing that draws amateur radio operators to it, is because I know this is a flagship event, certainly for the areas I've experienced here in the Rocky Mountain area. And so hopefully this kind of conversation we've had here is kind of helping people see, if you're listening to this, you may be an organizer of this, you might be a volunteer of something like this. So hopefully this was helpful for you to kind of hear about this event. We want to bring more events like this to the podcast, and so we're actually going to do another one on the Bear 100, because I think that's unique with the way you integrate WinLink into VHF WinLink into the comm plan also. So thank you, Kevin, for coming on. Is there any last tips or advice or anything you want to give?
I love ham radio, and one of the fun aspects of it is all the variety of it. So, and this is just one area.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on, Kevin.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Kevin Reeve N7RXE, for coming on the show and giving us a window into the organization of this event. Like Kevin mentioned, this event does test your gear. It tests your skills. It tests your ability to operate in a stressful environment. And these events are a great way for your group or your organization to know if you are prepared for emergency communication. This is a very well organized event that does push your skills and your gear to the limit. This will do it for this episode. We'd like to thank Chameleon Antenna for sponsoring the episode. And as always, please send me your comments, feedback, and show ideas to John, J-O-H-N, at hamradio360.com. 73.